But first, in the federal court, on the side of economic development and common sense, well, I reckon we might be seeing a turning of the tide on energy self-harm. But let's stop and think for a moment how we got into this mess in the first place. Because that's the obvious question arising from the non-stop lawfare against vital resource projects in this country. Now, why should taxpayers keep funding a body that's dead set on sabotaging the new resource developments that are essential to Australia's future prosperity, especially when that body has just been found by a federal court judge to be less than honest? And boy, in her judgment, Justice Natalie Charlesworth didn't miss. Now, this taxpayer-funded body is called the Environmental Defenders Office, and it's the green activist group behind a number of recent challenges to big new gas projects. We call what they're doing lawfare because it's like warfare, only using the courts as the battering ram rather than military weapons. So here's a background you need to know. Late last year, an Environmental Defenders Office backed challenge to Woodside's $16 billion Scarborough project argued that it could interfere with Indigenous whale songlines, even though it was several hundred kilometres off the WA coast, and the local Aboriginal groups had never been a maritime people. As well, another Defenders Office-backed challenge had temporarily blocked Santos's $5 billion Barossa project near the Tiwi Islanders off Darwin. But yesterday, a federal court judge lifted that ban, declaring that some of the evidence produced by the Defender's Office was tainted by, and I quote, confection and the coaching of witnesses. The claim by 3 Tiwi Islanders was that the proposed Santos pipeline, if built, would upset two of their dreaming creatures, a rainbow serpent and a crocodile man. Now, let's put to one side the issue of whether spiritual beliefs, as opposed to interference with actual archaeological remains, should be able to stop major resource projects. Justice Charlesworth found that this evidence, based on cultural mapping, was, quote, so lacking in integrity that no weight can be placed on it, adding also that there was a significant degree of divergence in the evidence of the Islanders. The judge said that the lawyer from the Defender's Office had engaged, and I quote, in a form of subtle coaching by urging Islanders to tell, quote, their stories in a way that propelled their traditions into the sea and into the vicinity of the pipeline. Remember, they were not maritime Aboriginal people. Now, yesterday's decision, alas, doesn't rule out further legal challenges. But what it has done is expose in a very public way how activists are dishonestly manipulating Indigenous people in their anti-energy campaigns. Now, not only does that deny these Indigenous people a chance to get ahead by developing their lands, but it also damages Australia's national interest. International partners like Japan are already warning that obstacles to new gas fields are putting their resource security at risk, as well as the future of Australia's $100 billion a year gas export industry. Not to mention, and this is where my focus is, the billions we get in taxes from these developments that pay for our hospitals, our roads, and a very high standard of living. But the real crime here is the fact that federal Labor is funding bodies that just make doing the government's job even harder. Now, a key duty of government is to foster economic development, because how can a country and its citizens prosper if we don't develop our natural resources? Yet this Environmental Defenders Office, that's been dead set on making us poorer, is actually funded to the tune of $10 million over 4 years, thanks to the Albanese government. Now, this was funding by elbow to reverse a funding cut made quite sensibly by my old boss, Tony Abbott, back in 2014. Now, this madness of funding bodies to damage our future prosperity has recently been called out by no less than former Labor Cabinet Minister, Joel Fitzgibbon. In a speech to the forestry industry late last year, Fitzgibbon said, and I quote, "It makes no sense to hand taxpayers' money to activists so that they can take legal action against the very government that gave them the money. Now, sure, no reasonable person should expect government to solve every problem, but government should always avoid making a bad situation worse and stop funding the enemies of our country. I reckon that might help too.